What's good, YouTube? Welcome back. Thank you for clicking onto this reaction. I hope you're looking forward to it just as much as I am. If you haven't already, head over to the content creators page. That link is in the description box down below. If you haven't already and you're enjoying our content, you know what you need to do. You need to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, but we're going to jump straight into this one.
League of Nations General Assembly, Geneva, Switzerland, February 24th, 1933. Everyone knows this vote will be tense. After the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, the League of Nations had tasked British politician Lord Lytton to investigate the circumstances of what's increasingly become known as the Mukden incident.
Okay.
The League Commission's report ascribes blame on both sides, but it also...
On both sides? That's very interesting that both sides got blamed there. Yeah, very interesting situation. All this is very similar to your country, Romania. Here, fanatics assassinated 4 prime ministers in 30 years. That's absolutely crazy, DZ.
Who says that the Kwantung Army had not acted in self-defense and calls the puppet state of Manchukuo illegitimate. Japanese troops should withdraw. Now the League of Nations votes to condemn Japan as the aggressor. 42 votes in favor, 2 opposed. And in response, Japanese Ambassador Matsuoka steps up to the podium. Japan, however, he says, finds it impossible to accept the report conducted by the assembly. He then
Well, of course you're going to say that.
Exits the hall, followed by
Well, of course he was going to say that.
Japanese delegation. They've just withdrawn from the League of Nations. Thanks so much to World Anvil for helping us forge today's historical tale. When Japan quit the League of Nations in 1933, it abandoned the most prominent international organization meant to guard against a new world war, and they weren't the only ones. That November, the new German Chancellor Adolf Hitler held a successful referendum on withdrawing from the League, and in 1937, fascist Italy quit when the League condemned its actions in what is now Ethiopia.
And we all know what the repercussions of that was.
Japan had long been frustrated with the League, arguing that it treated Asian nations differently from those of Europe or North America.
Which we can all agree was true.
Condemned Japanese actions in Manchuria, but happily let Britain and France set up colonial puppet states of their own in the Middle East. But even in direct diplomatic talks, Japanese ambassadors did themselves no favors by hiding the fact that their military was out of control. It saved Japan from looking weak and divided, sure, but as diplomats increasingly made assurances to foreign nations, only to have the military violate them, it made Japan appear untrustworthy and deceptive. The result was that Japan diplomatically isolated itself, removing all leverage on the world stage and leaving the government no tools to enact its foreign policy apart from one.
They've got a good point there. Do you know what I mean? The fact that the military was so willing to act on its own, that what was the point of talking to the political figureheads when they really had no say in what was going on in the country? You know, Japan just made this situation so that they did isolate themselves. But at the same time, I agree that the committee definitely looked down upon the Asian nations, which is a shame.
Military action. So, bereft of allies, Ambassador Matsuoka pioneered an anti-communist pact with the fascist states of Germany and Italy. Yet despite all that, things in Japan were kinda quiet. For 2 years, not much progressed. There were no domestic or international incidents, and the economy improved, though unrest still simmered. A corruption scandal brought down the prime minister in 1934, leading to further dissatisfaction with civilian rule. And in 1935, a factional dispute between officers at the Imperial Japanese Army Academy formed the prelude of what would come next. It happened like this. When military authorities uncovered a group of young officers plotting a coup at the academy, they expelled them and forced the Inspector General of Military Education, a prominent Imperial Way faction leader, into retirement. Then, when he was replaced by a general who led the rival Control faction, Imperial Way officers took it as evidence that the whole crackdown had been a setup. In retaliation, an Imperial Way officer walked into the general's office and murdered him with a sword. The killer's trial.
They're crazy. That's crazy. You're just going to go in and kill your general. You're just going to go in and kill your general.
Trial once again inflamed the public and convinced
it would inflame them.
That it was finally time to move against their enemies. The February 26th incident, Tokyo, 1936, 4 a.m. They called themselves the Righteous Army, gathering in the snowy barracks grounds, showing a postage stamp to indicate they're in on the plot. These are young and excited men. Their plan is to restore the emperor to power. With a rallying cry adapted from the old Meiji Restoration slogan, "Revere the Emperor, destroy the traitors." They assemble, nearly 1,600 strong, and march into the city center. At 5 a.m., they attack multiple targets simultaneously. Key buildings, moderate and liberal politicians.
And how does it go? Does it work?
Especially those who signed the Washington Naval Treaty. They besiege the Prime Minister's residence, shooting it out with police officers. And once through, they murder the Prime Minister and use a photo to confirm their kill.
Wow, they shoot the fucking police officers and then they go for the Prime Minister as well. Savage.
That they killed the wrong man.
They're just...
Only days later.
Oh, they did kill the wrong man, even though they had the photo. Holy. But the ferocity of the soldiers is crazy.
They'll learn that their target had escaped, and they'd actually killed his brother-in-law.
Oh, they killed his brother-in-law.
The finance minister's house, and kill him in his bed. They shoot an imperial advisor, a former prime minister, in front of his wife. Then they board a truck and head to the house of the new Inspector General of Military Education, the replacement for the Control Faction General murdered in the Military Academy incident, and machine gun him as his young daughter hides behind a table. They ransack a liberal newspaper,
Savage,
the Ministry of War, and take control of police headquarters. More assassination squads storm houses, but the occupants manage to slip away, and the group trying to take control of the palace doesn't succeed. The rebels then make their demands known. An Imperial Way-dominated cabinet, a full restoration of imperial power, and their leader, previously forced into retirement, instated as prime minister. But when Emperor Hirohito is informed, he's unequivocal. The plot must be crushed now.
Okay.
For 2 days, there's a flurry of negotiation. The rebels receive statements of support from some ministers, but the winds are changing. The emperor is firm.
So what happens here? Like, now the emperor has said that he needs the rebellion needs to be crushed, and that they're not doing it for me. Are they now on the wrong side in the eyes of the Japanese law, or are they still able to get away with it?
That this must end with force if necessary. By the morning of the 29th, rebels in the capital look out to see themselves surrounded by 20,000 loyalist troops and 40 warships in Tokyo Bay. Airdropped pamphlets blow in the wind, each saying the emperor has ordered them to stand down. Every radio airwave repeats this same message, and an enormous balloon carries a banner telling them not to resist. With the emperor publicly against them,
they had to.
Could not claim to be acting in his interest. It turned out all Hirohito had to do to stop this madness was speak up, a thing he could have done after any of the previous incidents or any that happened afterward.
Because he also wanted it to happen.
And yet he didn't. No public.
It's because he wanted it to happen.
Box to spread radicalism. The leaders are tried behind closed doors and shot without media present. Imperial Way officers are purged from the army or sent to inglorious far-off postings. But militarism only got stronger. On March 9th, the Prime Minister's cabinet, terrified, disgraced by their inability to prevent the chaos, and unable to function, resigned, which paved the way for a cabinet stacked with former, and for the first time, current military officers. By threatening to resign and not appoint new members, the military could make any prime minister fall. It effectively held veto on all policy, and its
there was no chance.
Would only grow stronger. The next year, on July 7, 1937, Japanese troops stationed outside of Beijing got into a confused nighttime encounter with a Chinese city garrison. Shots were exchanged, and when negotiations failed, both sides called for reinforcements. Tensions mounted. At 4:45 on July 8th, at a
what happens then?
Marco Polo Bridge, Chinese units fired on massing Japanese forces for an unknown reason. In response, 5,000 Japanese troops attacked, and the Second Sino-Japanese War had begun.
Here we go.
Until 1945, at which point it had merged with the Second World War and killed around 22 million people. But the Japanese government...
So the Manchuria situation and all of that was actually involved in the Second Sino-Japanese War, which I got incorrect. I thought it was, but it was basically the prelude of events that happened to the Sino-Japanese War. So that's interesting for me to know, so I don't make that mistake again, for sure. If the emperor put his foot down more often, history would have been different. I personally don't think that he was blameless for the war. I agree, DZ, he was not blameless for the war. He might not have wanted it to go to the extent that it went to, but he definitely wanted he definitely wanted to initiate those events and try to get his country into a better position in his eyes at any means necessary. But when he did see how far it went, I think he realised he made some mistakes, but he definitely was involved and needs to have some blame in regards to the Japanese people entering the Second World War.
Government got a preview of that in 1937, when it began to hear sickening reports of troops carrying out an unprecedented civilian massacre after taking Nanjing. But for the Japanese government, the problems went beyond and increasingly unaccountable.
They committed civilian executions. How far back do you want to go?
Because while both military factions had wanted war with China, neither had a strategic plan for how or what to do with it. Their doctrines were ideological positions, not military aims. They had no objective of when to stop, no strategy of how to hold and administer what they seized. The promised resources meant to secure and enrich Japan went right back into the war effort. When Germany invaded France in 1940, Japan scooped up its colony in Indochina. In retaliation, the United States placed an embargo on steel and petroleum, the most necessary raw materials in modern war. So then, desperate for war,
mate, it really does show you what sanctions can do to a country as well. They have a lot bigger effects than people realise.
Japan moved on the British and Dutch colonies of Southeast Asia in order to secure their resources. They would supply their war by starting new wars. To cloak the action in idealism, Japan announced it would liberate the nations of Asia from colonialism and lead them in a Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. In reality, it was a license to replace Western colonialism with their own. In 1940, all political parties dissolved, consolidated into the Imperial Rule Assistance Association,
and that's it,
as a way to combat factionalism. It officially joined the Axis powers and began working toward a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union.
Considering that they were one of their biggest problems at one point, or their biggest worries at one point, it's very interesting how they were so quick to align themselves with them. But once again, I assume it comes back to that situation, which is the friend of my enemy is my friend. Is that right? No, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. There we go. That's what I meant. The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Japanese politics, from the village level, were reorganized to support total war. And fearing attack by the United States, while the military was already so tied down, a group of officers began formulating a plan to break America's naval power in the Pacific. An action that would invite a conflagration larger than the Great Kanto earthquake and the end of a path no one knew they were walking.
And what a interesting choice of events that is to attack Pearl Harbor, and something I'm definitely looking forward to finding out more about. What a great reaction, great point in history, and I'm definitely looking forward to finding out some more in regards to the extra history content regarding the Japanese history for sure. Thank you very much for joining me today, guys, but I think we are going to be calling